Did you know that over 400,000 men were arrested in the 20th century just for being gay? From Rock Hudson's silent battle to Tab Hunter's carefully crafted image. Here are 20 things we learned about gay celebrities after they died. 1. Rock Hudson. He was not just an actor. He was a symbol of charm, strength, and Hollywood's golden age. But that was only on screen. In real life, he was carrying a truth he couldn't share. He spent decades hiding something very big. Rock Hudson was gay. Back in the 1950s and 1960s, this was something you couldn't talk about if you were famous. If people found out, your career would be over. So, he smiled for the cameras, kissed actresses on screen, and pretended. Every day he acted even when he wasn't filming. He had to. That's how the world worked back then. The lie was heavy. It followed him everywhere. He made movies that made people dream, but his own dreams were locked up. Even friends close to him didn't know the full story. It wasn't until 1985, near the end of his life, that he finally told the world he had AIDS. That moment changed everything. It forced people to look at the disease differently. Before that, most didn't even want to say the word. It was seen as shameful. But Hudson was a big star, and now it was his story. That made the world listen. 2. Paul Reubens. We are talking about an actor who made people laugh for years. His character, Pee Wee Herman, wore a gray suit, rode a red bike, and acted silly. Kids loved him. Adults laughed too. He seemed like he had nothing to hide. But there was something very big he never shared. Paul Reubens was gay. He kept that part of himself hidden from the world. And it stayed hidden until he died in 2023. Only after his death did a documentary reveal the truth. Why did he wait so long? Why did he have to keep it a secret? Reubens lived in fear of being judged. Being gay in the spotlight is not easy, especially when you make a living making people laugh. People expect funny people to be light, not heavy. They expect you to be simple, not complex. But behind the jokes, Paul had pain. He worried that people would stop loving him if they knew. That fear controlled him. He kept his real self locked away. What kind of life is that? He didn't trust the world with his truth. Can we blame him? This world can be cruel to people who are different, especially when they are famous. He spent years playing a happy, funny guy. But when the cameras were off, who was there for him? Who knew the truth? Maybe very few, maybe none. That kind of loneliness is deep. That kind of silence is heavy. 3. Anthony Perkins. This man was famous for playing Norman Bates in the movie Psycho. That role made him a star. People saw him as the quiet, strange man in the film, but few knew he was quietly hiding his truth in real life. Perkins was gay. He had relationships with men for many years, including one with actor Tab Hunter. But no one talked about it when he was alive. He never shared that part of himself with the public. The world only found out after he died in 1992. Why did it take so long for the truth to come out? He lived in fear, not of roles or scary films, but of being seen for who he really was. Back in those days, being gay was not accepted, especially in Hollywood. If you were an actor, you had to keep up a certain image, and if you broke that image, your career could be ruined. Perkins knew this, so he kept quiet. He smiled, worked hard, and stayed in the shadows. All while the world cheered for the man they thought they knew. He didn't just hide from fans. He hid from friends, co-workers, and even parts of himself. That kind of life takes a toll. Every award he won, every headline he made, was built on hiding. He wore a mask off-screen too, and no one asked why. Everyone believed the lie, that he was just another actor living the dream. But the truth was very different. He was a man afraid that being honest would destroy everything he worked for. 4. Cesar Romero. He is widely known for playing the Joker on TV. But behind the painted smile was a man who kept a real part of himself hidden. He was always shown as the smooth, handsome star. Always seen with women, always laughing, always charming. But something was missing: the truth. Cesar Romero was gay. Even though people around him suspected it, he never said it out loud, not once. And that silence followed him until the very end of his life in 1994. What kind of life forces you to keep so quiet? He was a big star in a time that didn't allow honesty. If a famous man said he was gay back then, it could end everything: his career, his safety, his respect. So Romero smiled for the cameras. He let the magazines print stories about his dates with women, but he never married. That part of his life was kept behind a locked door. Was it fear? Was it survival? Maybe both. Either way, it cost him something very real. 5. Ed Koch. This man led New York City with a loud voice and big ideas. He was bold, smart, and always had something to say. But when it came to one part of his life, he said nothing. Ed Koch was gay, but he never admitted it publicly. Not once. Not during his time as mayor. Not during his long years in politics. Only after he died in 2013 did his friends say it out loud. Why did it take death to tell the truth? He lived in the public eye. Cameras followed him. Headlines quoted him. But none of those stories ever included who he loved. Was it fear of losing power? Was it worry about losing voters? Maybe. Maybe it was more than that. Maybe it was the belief that being honest would ruin everything. And maybe he was right. Back then, politics was a cold place for people who were different. If you were gay and in office, you had to hide it. People could turn on you, even your own supporters. So Ed stayed quiet. He worked hard. He helped build the city, but part of him stayed locked away. That silence was loud. You could feel it even if he didn't speak it. 6. Stanley Baxter. He made people laugh, but behind the laughs was a life full of fear and hiding. He was a famous Scottish actor and comedian. People knew his shows, his voices, his funny faces, but they didn't know him. For most of his life, he lived with a heavy secret. He was gay, and he could never talk about it. Back then, in the United Kingdom, being gay was not just frowned upon. It was illegal. Men could be arrested and locked away. They could lose their jobs. They could be beaten or worse. Even if you were a star, that didn't protect you. It might have made things worse. All eyes were on you, and one wrong step could end everything. Stanley knew this. He had to act off stage as well as on stage. Every day was a performance. Every smile was part of the cover. He feared what would happen if people found out. Would they laugh at him? Would they stop watching? Would they hate him? These questions stayed in his mind for decades. He chose silence. He chose to hide, not because he was ashamed of who he was, but because the world around him was cruel. He married a woman, not out of love, but to keep up the act. He lived a double life. One life was for the public. The other was hidden, locked away, buried deep. In 2020, long after he had stopped performing, a biography told the truth. It said what he had never dared to say out loud. Stanley Baxter was gay. The book gave details he had kept to himself for so long. It was shocking to some, but to others it was a painful reminder of what so many people had to go through. He didn't just keep a secret. He lived in fear every day for years. Fame didn't make that easier. It made it harder. It meant more eyes, more lies, and more pressure. 7. Tab Hunter. He had the face everyone wanted to see. He was the perfect movie star in the 1950s. Blonde hair, blue eyes, strong jaw. He looked like the dream boyfriend. And that's exactly how Hollywood sold him. Girls screamed for him. Magazines praised him. He was in movie after movie. But behind all the smiles and posters was a man living in fear. Tab Hunter was gay, and no one could know. Back then, Hollywood had rules. These rules weren't written down, but everyone followed them. Rule 1, don't be different. Rule 2, don't talk about things people don't want to hear. Being gay was one of those things. If people found out, your career was over. So Tab did what he had to do. He went on fake dates with actresses. He posed for pictures. He smiled at fans. But every part of it was fake. He was playing a role even when the cameras were off. It wasn't just the fear of losing work. It was the fear of being hated. People back then were not kind to those who were different. Tab lived with that fear every day. He couldn't relax. He couldn't be himself. He couldn't love who he wanted to love. It wore him down. He had to hide parts of himself from everyone, even his closest friends. His real life was a secret. He had a long, quiet relationship with actor Anthony Perkins. They loved each other, but even that had to be hidden. Years later, when he was older and no longer in the spotlight, he wrote a book. In 2005, the truth came out. He told the world he was gay. He shared the pain, the fear, and the silence he had lived with. People called him brave. But why did he have to be brave just to be honest? Why did it take a whole lifetime to tell the truth? Tab's story wasn't just about coming out. It was about the damage done by years of hiding. It showed how being forced to live a lie can steal your peace. 8. Scotty Bowers. This guy was never the star on the screen, but he was the man behind some of Hollywood's darkest truths. He worked at a gas station, but this gas station wasn't just about cars. It was the place where stars came looking for something they couldn't ask for in public. Scotty became the person they trusted with their real lives. He arranged meetings, quiet ones, for actors and actresses who couldn't be seen with someone of the same gender. He wasn't just a helper. He was a lifeline to those who had no other way to be themselves. He gave them something the world didn't: safety. Scotty didn't brag. He didn't write about it for years. He kept those names and stories to himself. Why? Because the people he helped would have lost everything if the truth came out. These were big names, some of the biggest in film history. They had to live two lives, one for the world and one in the shadows. And Scotty was in the middle of all of it. He saw the fear, the shame, and the sadness in their eyes. They smiled on stage, but they cried behind closed doors. When most of the people he helped had passed away, Scotty finally told the truth. In 2012, he wrote a book. People were shocked. They called it gossip, but the stories weren't meant to hurt. They were meant to explain. He wanted people to understand what things were really like. The book was more than a collection of secrets. It was a history of pain and hiding, wrapped up in fancy clothes and fake smiles. 9. Freddie Mercury. We are now talking about a legend. He was larger than life on stage. His voice could shake a stadium. His energy pulled people in. The clothes, the power, the confidence, all of it made people think they knew him. But they didn't. Behind the lights and music, Freddie was quiet about one thing: his real self. He didn't label his sexuality. He didn't make statements. He just lived, and people guessed. But while his fans screamed for more, he was silently dealing with something very real and very painful. He had relationships with men and women. Some people thought that meant he wasn't sure of who he was. But it wasn't about confusion. It was about fear. Freddie knew the world wasn't kind to people who were different. Even with all his fame, he kept that part of his life away from the cameras. His love life was kept in shadows. Not because he wanted it that way, but because he had to protect himself. Then came the sickness. AIDS was spreading, but people didn't understand it. They blamed, they laughed, they judged. When Freddie got sick, he didn't tell the world. He didn't want pity. He didn't want shame. He went on performing. He went on smiling, but behind the scenes, his body was breaking down. Still, he stayed quiet. It wasn't until just before his death in 1991 that he told the truth. He had AIDS. A day later, there, he was gone. 10. Leslie Jordan. This man did what many could not. He spoke up and laughed out loud about who he was. He didn't try to blend in. He didn't wait to be safe. He was gay, and he let the world know it. That made him stand out in a world where most tried to keep quiet. He made people laugh, but his honesty made them listen. Every joke carried truth. Every story held weight. He used humor not just to entertain, but to open doors. People loved him for it. On shows like Will and Grace, he played characters that felt real. He wasn't just acting. He was showing the world that being gay didn't mean hiding. Still, that didn't mean things were easy for him. Leslie faced hate, just like others. He was judged. He was mocked. Fame gave him a spotlight, but it didn't make him immune to pain. Behind the jokes, he had lived through years of rejection. Then, in 2022, he was gone. A sudden death that left people stunned. The tributes came fast, not just from fans, but from people who saw themselves in him. People who felt less alone because he was out there, smiling and strong. He had given hope without even trying. He had built bridges just by telling his truth. 11. Paul Monette. This man wrote about his life, love, pain, and being gay in a world that didn't want to hear it. His words were raw, full of truth, and filled with anger and hope. He didn't pretend. He didn't water things down. He showed people what it was really like to live as a gay man during a time when being gay meant being hated, judged, and treated as less. His book, Becoming a Man, told everyone what it meant to grow up hiding who you are just to stay safe. He won an award for it in 1992. That should have made people take notice, but many didn't. His words sat on shelves while the world kept ignoring what he was screaming to say. Then, in 1995, he died from AIDS-related problems. And suddenly, people acted like his work was a new discovery. Why is that always the case? Why do people wait until someone is dead to say they mattered? He spent his life writing the truth, begging others to see what was happening, and most people didn't listen. When Paul died, readers and critics called him brave. They said his words opened eyes, but they had those words for years. The books didn't change. The pain didn't change. What changed was that he was no longer here. Dead authors can't ask for justice. They can't speak back. Maybe that's why people finally listened. It's easier to praise someone when they're gone and silent. 12. Dirk Schaefer. He was the man on magazine covers, handsome, confident, and named Playgirl's Man of the Year in 1992. But it was all a mask. Underneath the strong smile and perfect image was someone hiding, someone scared. Dirk was gay, but in public, he had to act like he wasn't. That lie wasn't his choice. It was the only way to stay safe and stay famous. He was trapped by the very image that made him famous. And the longer he hid, the heavier it got. He made a movie in 1995, calling it Man of the Year, just like his title. But this time, he told the truth. The movie showed the pain of pretending. It wasn't funny. It wasn't fake. It was a cry for help hidden in art. People praised the film, said it was smart and honest. But after the applause, what changed? Nothing really. The world went back to liking the lie more than the truth. Dirk kept smiling for cameras, but inside, he was falling apart. In 2015, he died from an overdose, alone, found in his car, no big send-off, no lights, just silence. People acted shocked, but should they have been? Dirk spent years showing his pain in plain sight. He wasn't quiet about it. He told people. He showed people. He even joked about it just to make it easier for them to hear. But still, no one really listened. 13. Stephen Gately. This showman was young, charming, and loved by fans of the pop group Boyzone. He stood on big stages, smiling and singing like nothing could touch him. But behind that perfect image was a personal truth he had to fight hard to share. He was gay. And when he told the world in 1999, it was a big deal. Some clapped for him, some whispered behind his back. Even though he was famous, he still faced quiet judgment. People smiled to his face and rolled their eyes behind it. Being open about who he loved was seen as risky, but he did it anyway. He was one of the first big boy band stars to come out. That made him a target, but it also made him a leader. He didn't just come out, he stayed out. He married the man he loved in 2006. He didn't hide. That took courage. Every time he walked into a room with his husband, he was making a statement, whether he wanted to or not. But still, not everyone was kind. Some fans left. Some news outlets ran stories that made his love seem like a problem. He smiled through it all. But was he really okay? In 2009, he died suddenly from a heart condition. The news shocked people. He was only 33. Headlines said he died too soon. They talked about how much he was loved. But they didn't talk enough about how hard he worked to be himself in a world that didn't always make it easy. They didn't ask why more support didn't come while he was alive. Why was his bravery only fully noticed after his death? 14. Ari Gold. He lived loudly, but the world often acted like it couldn't hear him. He was one of the first gay artists to sing openly about love between men. He didn't hide who he was in his lyrics, in his music videos, or on stage. That sounds brave now, but back then it was seen as dangerous. Record labels said no. Radio stations turned him away. People in power told him to tone it down, to be less obvious. But Ari refused. He sang his truth anyway, even when it cost him chances. Even when it meant pushing through doors that kept closing. He didn't just fight to be heard. He fought to stay visible in a world that didn't want to see him. His songs talked about heartbreak, hope, and being rejected for being different. He worked with stars like Cyndi Lauper and Diana Ross, but he never stopped making his own kind of music. He didn't want to just fit in. He wanted to show others like him that they didn't have to pretend, that they didn't have to be ashamed. Still, the music world mostly stayed quiet about him while he was alive. They gave him praise in small doses, but never the stage he truly earned. In 2021, Ari died after fighting a long illness. When the news came out, people called him a pioneer. They posted tributes. They finally said what they should have said long ago, that he mattered, that he was brave, that his music was ahead of its time. But why did they wait? Why did his truth only become loud after he went silent? He gave the world all he had, and the world waited until it was too late to give anything back. 15. Terry Sanderson. Terry Sanderson didn't sing or act, but he did something just as bold. He spoke up when most people stayed quiet. He wrote books to help gay people feel strong, not ashamed. He pushed for rights when the law said people like him didn't deserve them. He called out lies in newspapers and on TV that painted gay people as dangerous or wrong. He didn't just fight back. He fought smart. He used his words as weapons and his calm as armor. But that didn't mean life was easy. He began his work in the 1970s when things were even harder. Back then, saying you were gay could ruin your job, your safety, even your life. But Terry didn't hide. He opened a local branch of the Campaign for Homosexual Equality. He wrote a column called Media Watch in Gay Times that looked closely at how media made gay people seem like villains. Every week, he called out the lies, the bias, and the fear-mongering. He showed how even small words in headlines could do big harm. But how many people were really listening? For years, his work was pushed to the side. Some called him a troublemaker. Others said he was too serious. But being serious was the point. He saw the harm being done, and he wanted it to stop. He didn't want praise, he wanted change. And change is hard, slow, and often lonely. Still, he never stopped, even when his name was left out of big stories, even when he was ignored while others got the spotlight. He stayed focused on helping others, on fixing things that were broken. In 2022, he passed away. That's when the headlines started. They called him a hero, a fighter, a pioneer. They finally gave him the words he deserved. But he never got to read them. While he was alive, those words were rare. While he was working, he was often overlooked. That says a lot. 16. Billy Beane, an athlete who played baseball at the highest level. He wore the major league uniform, stood on that field, and hit home runs like the best of them. But there was something he didn't say back then, something he carried alone. Billy was gay, but he didn't tell anyone until after he had retired. He kept that part of himself hidden during his entire career. Why? Because he knew what it would cost him. Fans, teammates, maybe even his job. That fear was heavy. It followed him into every game, into every locker room, into every press interview. He had to pretend to be someone else. He smiled through it. He played through it. But no one knew the truth. And that silence wasn't just his. It belonged to the whole sport. After baseball, Billy spoke up. He became the MLB's Senior Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. He tried to change things from the inside. He pushed for more fairness, more openness, more honesty in sports. He talked to teams, to coaches, to young players. He told them what it was like to hide, to fear, to stay silent. He worked hard to make sure others wouldn't have to go through what he did. That made him more than a player. It made him a fighter. In 2024, Billy Beane died after a tough fight with leukemia. His passing brought sadness, but also praise. People called him brave. They shared his story. 17. Montgomery Clift. This man was a Hollywood star. He had the looks, the talent, the roles that made people talk. In the 1940s and 1950s, he was in hit films like A Place in the Sun and From Here to Eternity. People admired him, they cheered for him, but few knew the truth about the man behind the screen. Montgomery Clift was gay, but he never said it out loud. He lived his life in silence. He lived his truth in the shadows. At that time, being gay in Hollywood was dangerous. It could end your career. It could end your friendships. It could leave you alone. So Clift hid it. He smiled on camera, acted like everything was fine. But inside, he was hurting. He wanted to be free, but the world around him was not ready to let that happen. He had to play two roles, one for the screen and one for real life. And the second one was the hardest. He became known not just for his acting, but for his sadness. People said he changed after a car crash, but some say the real crash came from hiding who he was. He drank, he used pills. He became more and more broken over time. Fame didn't save him, it only added pressure. Everyone wanted something from him, but no one gave him space to be himself. He lived that way until the end. 18. Paul Lynde. He was funny. He had a voice and a way of talking that stood out. People laughed when he spoke. He was in movies and TV. He was on game shows. Everyone thought they knew him, but they didn't. Paul Lynde was gay, but he never said it during his life. He never came out. Not once. He smiled, joked, made people laugh, but deep inside, he was hiding something big. Even though he acted silly and loud, his truth was hidden. He played funny characters, many that seemed a little bit like him, but he never admitted the truth. Why didn't he? Because being honest could have ruined everything. He could have lost work. He could have lost fans. Back then, being gay wasn't accepted. It wasn't safe. Paul knew that, so he kept quiet. Even as people guessed, even as rumors spread, he said nothing. That silence must have been heavy. Paul died in 1982. He was alone when it happened, and only after his death did people start talking openly. Friends, writers, others in the industry finally confirmed what he never said. It was clear. He had been living in fear of losing everything. That fear controlled his life. He made people laugh, but he wasn't free. His joy on camera was real, but so was the pain behind it. 19. Liberace. Liberace was a star unlike any other. He played the piano like a magician and filled rooms with gold, glitter, and glowing lights. People loved his shows. They packed theaters just to see his smile and sparkle. But behind all that glitter was something very real. He was hiding his true self. Liberace was gay, but he never said so in public, not once. He spent his life saying he wasn't, even when people asked, even when they knew. He wore flashy clothes, he made jokes, he winked at the camera. People thought maybe he was different, but he denied it all. Even when a man tried to sue him for palimony and outed their relationship, Liberace fought it and won. He kept the lie going. But why? Because he was afraid of losing money, afraid of losing fans, afraid of what people would say. Fame gave him a stage, but it also gave him fear. In 1987, Liberace died. The cause was AIDS-related illness, but even then, his people tried to hide that too. Only later did it become clear. Only then did people accept what many had always known. The truth couldn't stay buried, but it came too late. He was gone. To 20, Cary Grant. This man was a movie legend. He was charming. He looked perfect. He starred in classic films. He married 5 different women. People saw him as the perfect man. But behind that perfect image, there were questions. There were rumors. And there was one big thing he never talked about: his true self. He lived with actor Randolph Scott for more than 10 years. They shared a house. They took pictures together. They looked happy. People wondered. Magazines even joked about it. But Grant said nothing. He never explained. He just kept smiling for the camera. And that silence said a lot. People close to him said they believed he was gay or bisexual, but Cary never confirmed it. Not once. He let the world think what it wanted. After he died, the talk grew louder. Writers started to ask serious questions. Friends opened up. But the truth never came from Grant himself. He took it with him.